Good evening and welcome to BBC News. Boston's police commissioner has said he believed the two men suspected of the marathon bombings were planning more attacks. Ed Davis said the authorities uncovered an arsenal of homemade explosives. But there are now concerns that the surviving suspect may be too badly injured ever to be questioned. My colleague Clive Myrie has been in the city throughout the day and has the latest. Been involved in the treatment of 33-year-old transit police officer Richard Donoghue, who was shot in the right thigh in that shootout between the two Tsarnaev brothers on Thursday night, Friday morning. We heard the extent of his injuries there, that he suffered major blood loss and was critically injured at the time. We've heard some of the details there of the treatment that he's been receiving, that he's now sedated and still in intensive care, but he has been able to communicate with doctors. We also heard before that from Officer Donoghue's brother, who thanked the emergency services and the medics who've been looking after his brother. So let's return to the events of the day in Boston and listen to this report from Ian Pannell. Thousands of runners stood in silence today at the start of the London Marathon to remember the victims of the Boston Marathon bombing 6 days ago. The commemoration came just before the starting gun was fired, with many of the runners wearing black armbands in tribute. Security was tight along the route of the race, but a record 700,000 people were there to cheer the runners on. Our sports editor, David Bond, reports.
Once again, that it won't be cowed. David Bond, BBC News, on the Mall.
It's 18 minutes past 8. The headlines on BBC News. Time for the sports news now for a full roundup from the BBC Sports Centre. Here's Damien Johnson with news of some rather funny antics going on in certain places. Damien? In China's Sichuan province, survivors are still being pulled from the rubble. At least 207 people are dead or missing and more than 11,000 injured. Rescuers are struggling to reach the worst affected areas.
But the authorities do not now expect a significant increase. John Sudworth, BBC News, Yarn.
Syrian opposition sources say a government offensive on a town near Damascus has left dozens of people dead. We have dismay amongst many opposition figures that yesterday this Friends of Syria meeting promised plenty of aid but non-lethal aid. The Duchess of Cambridge has honoured the achievements of hundreds of scouts at Windsor Castle. 400 children and young people from across the UK and the Commonwealth attended the prestigious annual celebration. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Whittle was there. Time for a look at the weather forecast now. Weakened